All right, today we're gonna cover my top 5 tips to get great tone out of your HX Stomp. These are gonna be simple, easy, you can do this. You gotta get great tone by this weekend. Let's dive in. Also, it's not just for the HX Stomp, it's for the Helix, the Pod Go, all the Helix units, the HX Stomp XL, all of them. You get it. Now, a couple weeks ago, I made a video called my top 5 tips to maximize your HX Stomp, where it was more of a utility video, like how to set it up, look at some of the menu things, how to use different, well, I can't find any of them now, but different units with your HX Stomp to maximize it. If you haven't seen that, go check it out. I'll link it down below or somewhere. What's cool is at the end of that video, I asked you guys, I told you I was gonna be making today's video, and I said, hey, what do you want this video to look like? And there were a bunch of responses, a lot of good responses on how to get great tone, but one of the themes that was pretty big was actually routing. How to route the HX Stomp, a bunch of different suggestions on that. And so I decided to take that topic and move it to a separate video. So before I record that video, if you have any other ideas around routing your HX Stomp that you would like to see, let me know so I can customize that video for what you guys actually want to see. But today we're gonna get great tone, so grab your guitar and let's pull up a blank preset in HX Edit. We're gonna do everything on HX Edit today, not the unit. Now we're gonna start from scratch and we're going to just basically build this preset together. So if you follow along, you'll get a nice free preset out of this. It's already set up to get great tones, and we're gonna cover 5 different steps. I'm just gonna walk through 5 different steps on what I would do to get great tone, things to think about. And don't skip out early because number 5 is very important. All right, let's go ahead and grab an amp and cab, and I want to get a little more gainy amp than I normally do. We're going to pick the Matchstick Jump, which is channel 1 and 2 together. I mean, it sounds pretty good right out of the box. Now, I was going to be talking later in the video about something, but I realized we need to talk about it now, and that is the noise gate. If you click on this main little emblem up here, we can turn on and off this input gate, and I want you to listen to this. It quiets it right up. So when you have a gainy tones, you need to quiet them up, you can put the input gate on. All right, the first thing that we need to know is how your guitar is going to affect your tone. We need to know that because guitars all sound different. They're all made different. And most importantly, they have different pickups in them. This is my Gil Paris Natural with humbuckers and 1 single coil in the middle. I love this because these humbuckers are lower output. But let's hear how my 3 different guitars sound. I also have back there a made in Mexico Tele, and then I have my brand new Revolta Mondata 18, which is a lot higher output, way more gainy. So let's just hear how the different guitars sound through this preset. But for the remainder of the video, I'm just going to use my Gil Paris. Love it. Now, because our amp has more gain in this example, it might have been a little harder to hear the differences, but here's what you need to know. Single coils are more bright. I don't know why I'm doing this backwards. I would normally put dark on this end. Doesn't matter. Single coils are more bright. Humbuckers are darker. And then we have things in between like P90s, which tend to be brighter, I think, but a little less bright than a single coil. Then you have humbuckers like I have, which are like low output humbuckers that would fall somewhere on the spectrum. You need to know what guitar you have and what kind of pickups it has so you know what you might need to do. If you have single coils, you might need to work to tame the top end, tame that brightness that comes out of those single coils. If you have dark humbuckers, you might need to work to bring clarity because they're already naturally warm and thicker. All right, number 2, we're moving on. We need to mic our cab. Now it already loaded a 2x12 match G25 and it loaded it with a 57 dynamic. Now not all microphones are the same. They all have different tones, different clarities, different strengths, pros and cons, strengths and weaknesses, and none of them are bad. It all just depends on what your objective is. And so with this guitar, I want clarity. I want to warm this up a little bit, but not too much. So let me just show you what the different microphones do. We have all of these here. Our 57 dynamic and our 7 dynamic are both really bright tones. While our ribbon mics are much warmer. So the 121 ribbon, you can see already warm, dark, maybe muddy. The 160. And the beefiest of all is this 4038. So if I had my single coils on, or I had my Telecaster, I would pick one of these darker, more full microphones. Now, one other thing to think about when you're thinking about microphones is to play around with this distance. This 4038 is a very deep, warm sounding microphone. But the thing to remember is that distance, when we think about distance, let me draw it for you. When it comes to distance on a microphone, let's draw our little speaker cab. We have our cone, we got the center part, boom. When we mic a cab, the closer we are, the more bass. The further away we are, we still retain the tone, but we have less bass. So let's say we really like the ribbon 121 ribbon or the even that really deep 4038, we can mess around with the distance of the microphone to help control some of the lower end. Already sounds much better just playing with the distance. So don't be afraid to mess with the distance. Choose a mic that you think you need, and if you already have a really dark guitar, you might want to pick one of these brighter microphones and keep the distance really close. So you retain the bass, but you also have the high end. And if you need less bass, you just start moving this away. Now there's also the position closer to the middle of the cab right here. We already have a good visual here. I don't know why I had to draw it over there. The closer to the middle, the brighter your tone is going to be. And the further away, the darker, maybe even more muddy. So again, depending on what kind of guitar, what kind of pickups you have, just know those principles and start dialing in to like solve the issue of whatever your guitar is bringing to the table. Like you want to enhance your guitar, not fight it all the time. Does that make sense? Now, another thing we can do is to start playing with our cuts. So I'll give us a dramatic, we'll just pick the 57. I'll put it all the way at the front. And we can use our low and high cuts to cut our tone. So it's super bright, right? And I'm using humbuckers right here. We can start dialing back this high cut pretty extremely to tame some of that high end. And you can go crazy with it, go too far. Now, I already did an in-depth video discussion on like the digital harshness that comes with some of these modelers. If you haven't seen that video, I'll link that up or down below as well. You should definitely go check that out after this one because we do an experiment just really trying to understand what makes the digital clipping or the harshness stick out. So that's not covered so much in this video. Go check that video out. All right, another thing I like to do is just go in and actually just get the amp, which we have the jump amp right here, and then add a cab. We can add a dual cab now. Go here to dual and pick a cab. So we had the G25, and on this side we can pick the H30 and kind of combine these. We can also combine microphones. I mean, this amp sounds so good, and I haven't even touched it. Now, there are some things I like to do. I like to get rid of the sag, get rid of the hum. You could hear it. You could hear it humming in there. I don't like the hum. Get rid of the ripple, bring down the bias excursion, and bring up the bias a little bit here. That kind of makes the tubes like immediate. Not a lot of sag. It's kind of how metal guitars are set up, or metal amps, and I like that as well. I want it punchy right away. Now, if you are keeping a stereo image, not a lot of people play stereo, but you could pan these and get two different sounds on each side if you so desire that. Just be careful that one might be a little louder than the other, and you need to come in and mess with the level. All right, the third thing is compression. We need a compressor because it can really just tie everything in together. Do you know what compression does? Let me show you. Compression is one of those things that takes your signal and does exactly what's in the name. It compresses it, it squeezes it. That's why you have some pedals that are compressors named squeeze, right? So let's say our tone is here. Our tone is the vibration of sound. It's coming in like this. We have our nice guitar sound just vibrating through there, giving us some beautiful tone. What a compressor does is it begins to bring up the lower levels and bring down the higher levels. So as you compress more strongly, this would be your new compression, it begins to squeeze this sound in between these new parameters that we have set. So what compression is doing is it's taking the highest volumes and bringing them down so you don't jump out and get too loud on the highest volumes, but it's also doing the opposite to the low sounds. It's bringing up the volume of the low sounds like this. And the third thing it does is it adds compression adds sustain, which means your signal is going to last longer. Now, where does sustain come from? I like to think if our blue signal's there and we've just squished it, it's gonna start oozing out the side or down further. So we're gonna keep coming down here and our signal's actually going to last longer because we just took this huge sound and squished it, and so you're gonna get more of it later, which is more sustain. Hopefully that makes sense. Now, I actually like a subtle compression that I could just leave on all the time. I like the kinky comp. Immediately it gets louder. Let me turn off this input gate. This is another reason why the input gate is so important. Why are compressors so loud, Jimmy? Well, I'll tell you. It's bringing up that low hum that we have in our amp and bringing it up. It's compressing it. It's bringing down the peaks, but it's also bringing up the quiet. That's why compressors can be kind of loud, which is another reason why the noise gate is so valuable. Now, this is set up pretty extreme. The most important, I like an attack to come in really quick, just like it came in here in the factory setting, and I like my release to be nice and long for what I like. But I do want to bring down and use this mix, which is kind of like a blend knob. It's blending my original tone with compression. I like bringing this down fairly low, so I have a nice amount of compression, and sometimes I bring the sensitivity down a little bit so I'm not compressing too much. Now, it's one of those effects that many people say you can't really hear. It's more of a feel thing, but you can hear it, especially when you're plucking lightly, some light notes. Now, I plucked those the same hardness. I struck the string equally both times, but when I turn the compressor on, it brings that volume up. Now, there's a word I do want to say, I'm going flip-flopping, that I want to say about the input gate. How do you use an input gate? It comes like this, factory, and I think that's a pretty good setting, but sometimes I feel like if I'm playing really soft, that gate is coming in a little too hard. Almost like it wants to chop it off before it's done. I'll make it extreme. The gate is closing too fast. So what I like to do is bring it all the way down and then bring it up until the noise goes away. So that's pretty quiet. There's still a little bit of noise in there, but that's a little less of a gate than we had before. Now, the thing to remember, another thing to remember about compression, if you do like more heavy settings, is that the more you add gain, and we already have a pretty gained up amp, but we haven't even added our overdrive yet. When we add gain, the more natural compression becomes present. And so if you start stacking a lot of overdrives, or you have a lot of amp gain with overdrives, too much compression is not a good thing. Too much compression will leave you, leave your tone feeling lifeless, like it's just dead. No matter how hard you hit it, it's just like this big pile of mush. That's what happens when you have too much compression. So if you are going to be gaining up your amp even more and stacking a lot of overdrives, you might want a setting to bring down the mix even more, bring down the sensitivity, or just turn your compression off altogether. So just know that the more gain, the more natural compression there is, the less compression you need from an external or another block, or even if it's an external pedal that you're using with the HX Stomp, the less you need. More gain already has a lot of compression. All right, number 4 are effects. We need to add some effects, and we were just talking about overdrive, so let's grab an overdrive. Now you have your blues breaker types, which are more open, and then you have your tube screamer types, which are more mid boost, and then you have higher gain stuff, which adds a lot of compression. Let me just show you how I would dial in the Timmy. I really like the Timmy. Now we heard, I might need to bring the threshold up on this input gate. Now, lower gain and higher volumes result in a more open sound, and there's less compression. I like using this most of the time because I play rhythm most of the time. It just adds more gain to your amp in a natural way. But if you want a more compressed, thick sound, you can up the gain and just bring down the level to match what you want. And that's gonna be nice for like lead tones, like single note lead lines where you want that extra thick, extra compressed sound. Let's hear the difference between the two. I mean, it sounds good, right? I mean, just stock settings. But how I would normally do it is back off the gain a little bit and bring up the level. But let's get another tone where we're cranking up the gain. Just more compression. So the sound, what are you going for? That's what you need to ask. But just know the principle is less gain, more volume, less compression, more open, more gain, volume to taste, less volume, more compression, more thick. I'm going to leave it at the stock setting because it's not really that bad. This is where I was going to tell you about the noise gate, but we've already covered it. The next thing we want to do is add our wet effects to get this worship guitar tone that we want. And usually that's just delay and reverb. Now I have a delay and reverb that I really like. Let's do stereo because we want that thick width. And there's actually one in here I never play with, and it's the Heliosphere, which has reverb built in. Let's just remind myself what this sounds like. Now normally I like to set up my delay to be a quarter feedback. This is pretty high. We have depth and a rate. The scale is down to 75, which 75% of a quarter is going to get you that dotted eighth sound on top of your quarter. I like to bring up the headroom. And then there's also reverb. Let's just see what that sounds like at the stock setting. sounds pretty good. I'm gonna bring down the reverb mix and up the delay mix. Just play with it a little bit here. I noticed that it hits the delay and the reverb is only applied to the delay, so not your original tone, which I don't know if I like that. It would help the delay stick out. So if you're doing a dotted eighth thing and you really want that dotted eighth to stick out, this might be a good setting. That sounds really good. I actually don't ever use the heliosphere, so I might play around with that some more. My go-tos here are for delay, we'll do stereo again, is the transistor tape. Put this to quarter, scale at 75. I bring up the headroom. I also like to bring up that wow and flutter because I love modulation. Turn the trails on. And then the reverb that I love it all the time, is the dynamic hall, and it sounds good at the factory setting. I was clipping a little bit there. So what I'm gonna do, if you hear that clipping, that just means you have too much volume. And so I'm gonna bring down my channel volume, and hopefully I can bring it up in post without it clipping anymore. I just saw that I was clipping. And a lot of wet effects will do that. Especially modulation. You just gotta be careful how much you're throwing into it. What things that will help are bringing up the headroom, but I saw that I just clipped there, so wow. I have too much volume going into it. So if you hear that clipping, you can make up volume other places, especially like after the wet effects over here on the block, or I'm actually gonna show you some tips in that last tip, so don't go anywhere. Bring up the spread, and I'm also gonna bring up the mix. And let's just do a dotted eighth. All right, the thing to remember about delay and reverb is that delay gives you a stereo image. So we're thinking left to right. We hear it ping-ponging in each of our ears. Delay gives us this stereo image left to right, where reverb, although it is in stereo, reverb, gives us distance. This is front to back. And so the reason people love reverb is because it gives you a sense of space far and away. So sometimes people say, man, your tone sounds huge. That's because it sounds further away. Now, if you are too far away, you can't hardly hear it, right? You can soak your tone in so much reverb that it's too much, but the right amount can make it sound massive, like you're in the Grand Canyon with a bunch of reverb. Or if you ever heard someone just talk straight into a mic like this with no reverb, and it sounds really close and it sounds intimate and personal, where reverb combined with delay gives us this huge space, left and right, front to back. And you can't hardly have too much reverb. I say that, we hear it in isolation when we're just playing, you're like, whoa, that's a lot of reverb. And it is, but I have a assignment for you. After you watch this video, I'll click another video below, or I'll link another video below where I talk about how reverb can't be heard. I do an experiment with reverb where I record a part with no reverb, just delay, and I play it, and then I add the washer reverb, and you're like, wow, those sound really different. And then I put those recordings into a mix, and it's amazing how much that reverb just disappears. But it sounds good. It acts like glue to glue everything together, but you don't hear the reverb like you did in isolation. And that's one of the tough parts about creating tones at home, is we think, oh, that's way too much reverb. But then when we show up, you're like, all that reverb disappeared. Like, I go out when I play and I have a wireless pack so I can hear, and I'm like, oh, I thought that reverb was gonna be too big and too washy, and I barely hear it. So don't be afraid to use a lot of reverb. Now let's go try it. Now there's a thing I wanted to show you in case you're new to the Helix, the HX Stomp world, when messing with our delay and reverb, that this mix parameter set at 50 is as much delay that you're gonna get. When you start going above 50, all you're doing is decreasing the amount of tone from your guitar. So you didn't hear any of my original tone, and then if you bring the mix all the way down, you're just hearing the guitar. So 50% is the most you're gonna get out of it. If you want more delay than that, you can't. Yeah, you can do more to tone ratio, but you're just decreasing your tone at this point. Same is true of the reverb. So let me delete this, not delete, let me just shut off this delay, mix all the way down, nothing. Mix all the way up, no tone. So 50% is the max, and I would say a nice ambient reverb, depending on which reverb you're using, a nice ambient reverb settings tend to be like mix anywhere from like 25, let's say, all the way up to 50. That range is nice and thick, and if you still think it's too thick, you can go down to like 19. Sounds good. But if you bring it up, and the more wet effects you have, the less notes you need to play. So if you're playing lead lines, you're not playing a lot of notes, having a lot of effects on there is not a bad thing. All right, so we got a nice tone on to number 5, but before we get to number 5, I want to let you know that you can download a free tone secrets guide. If you're getting value out of this video and you want a visual guide to help you get great tone, I put it all into a PDF. There are 2 versions. There's one for the Pod Go, since its editor is different, and then there's one for the Helix HX Stomp. Click the link below for depending on which unit you have, or grab both of them. Doesn't matter, they're free, they're yours, go check them out. All right, number 5, and this is the most fun, how to stick out in a mix. A lot of the questions I had were, hey, my tone, I dial it in at home, but it just doesn't cut through the mix. Well, we're gonna fix that, and we're gonna fix that with EQ. Let's turn off our wet section right now, and let's bring in some EQ. We're just gonna put this right after the amp. We'll go ahead and get stereo, but since did I pan? I can't remember, it doesn't matter. No, I didn't. EQ. First, we're gonna get a tilt EQ. Now, what does a tilt EQ do? Well, let me show you. A tilt EQ takes your tone. Let's just say this is your tone. This is the frequency spectrum. So all the way down to 0 hertz, all the way up to 20,000 whatever hertz. This takes your guitar tone and sets a point right in the middle, and instead of you just playing the full spectrum of your guitar, it begins to tilt it at whatever point you decide. So you can put a point right in the middle at whatever frequency you want and begin to tilt just like this. So in this case, I picked a point and I'm boosting. I'm heading towards the brighter. This is brighter, darker, unlike I did earlier. So like this, if my guitar's just a little too muddy and I can't really hear it, I would apply a tilt EQ, which begins taking away the bass frequencies while boosting the bright frequencies. Let's play with that. So we have our tilt EQ. The center is where we're going to begin tilting. Anywhere around the 500 to 1,000 is a good range to play with. So we could just start at like 6 something here. And do we want to go darker and begin to tilt down, or do we want to go brighter and start tilting up? Well, I feel like our amp here is a little on the dark side. I mean, it sounds good. There's a lot of nice low end. But again, when we're dialing things in at home, we like that low end because we want to almost sound like a full band. But when you're playing in a live scenario, when you got keys and the kick drum and bass, you want to stay away from those frequencies. So we can apply a tilt EQ. Now, it's almost subtle, which is a good thing, but it's taking away a lot of those lower frequencies. That's really gonna help you stand out in a mix. Awesome, I love that. That's a good trick. And you can just bring this brightness up based on what you feel like you need in the moment. In your guitar, remember, everything's different. So just play with that. The next kind of EQ that you can use is the low high shelf. Now this is very similar to a tilt EQ. Let me show you. It's very similar to our tilt EQ, but the shelf, instead of picking one point, which you can do on a shelf, you can select 2 points and decide how much you're boosting them. So we could select one down here at like 500 and this one up here at 700, let's just say. And the shelf is not just tilting everything, it's actually flat like a shelf until it gets to that point that we specified, and then it connects them like that. And so you can actually dial in a little more precisely what you like. And so let's try it. So a good reference, that warm, nice, where it starts getting muddy, anything below the 500s can get a little muddy. And so let's set our low frequency there, our low gain, and bring out like 2 dB or so. Then we got this, the high frequency. Let's bring that down to where we are and boost maybe around 700-800, somewhere in here, and boost that 2 dB, 2.5. Let's see what we got. So we have our original tone. Doesn't sound bad. It's just like it's ready to go. It just adds a little flavor to it, a little sprinkling of it's ready. You know, it almost sounds like it's already mixed well. It just sounds so good. And this can help take away the muddiness of our wet section that we were kind of getting earlier. I was playing, but I knew we would get to this part of the video. Add some drive. Now let's try it with it off again. That sounds amazing. Now, let's leave that to be our tone, but let's just say, there's one other trick with EQ that I want to cover, and I like putting this at the end. Let's just turn off our wet section in the overdrive. I like using a graphic EQ. We're not going to cover the parametric. That's way more surgical, and we can get into that in another video. But these graphic EQs, there's a 10-band and there's the Cali. If you're scared by all these, start with the Cali. It's fine. I use the Cali a lot, especially in the Pod Go. But what I like to use this for is to crank like 3 to 3.5 dB of clean boost. Now, if this was before the amp, it would add more gain like I do with the Pod Go. You know, we're stuck with an EQ in the Pod Go. So I use it as gain to go into my amp. But at this point, we don't need any more gain. We have a high gain amp. I want to put this at the end to just be a solo boost. This is just clean, pure volume. And then we're gonna do one more thing with it. So you see, it just gives you clean volume. But what you can also do is use it as a tone shaper based on what you want to do. Maybe that solo, you need to push the mids and cut a little bit of this muddy 240. Let's hear how that sounds. Just gives you more volume. This gives you a mid boost. If you need the opposite, maybe your guitar is mid heavy, or you picked an amp that is already a little boxy feeling and you want to add some depth to it, then you can mid scoop it, where we're bringing out, you know, maybe pick the 10 band EQ and mid scoop this, boom, do like the V shape, you know, I don't know. That would be pretty extreme. You know what a mid scoop does. Now, I hope this video was helpful for you. If you want to support the channel directly and get some good tones by this Sunday, check out my Expanse pack. It's an ever-growing collection of presets that you pay once for, but you get updates for life. So it's kind of like a subscription where you get monthly updates, but it's not like a subscription because you only pay once. And now is the best time to get it. There might even be a sale depending on when you're watching this. So click the link in the description, check out the Expanse pack. Now, before you go, I want you to check out this video here where I show you exactly how to wire up the HX Stomp to use with external pedals, whether you're putting them in front or in the effects loop. Click this video. I know you're going to enjoy it. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.